that's a really profound dovetail the role of reversal with veterinarians to understand and to help even identify for clients where they're at. They may not even understand what you're saying to them about the condition of their pet, especially if it's a terminal diagnosis. So that's where I see veterinarians could really benefit from learning all this, and pet parents will benefit. It's so clear how what I went through, how I navigated it, and how I transformed loss into love, which is an expanded heart, and grief into growth.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode.
Hey everyone, we have a guest that some of you guys might recognize. We have Nancy M. Gordon, LCSW. She is a grief expert, a licensed therapist, consultant, #1 international best-selling author, speaker, and engaging podcast guest. She has been a speaker at the House Call and Mobile Vet virtual conference this past year, so that's where some of you guys may recognize her from. Her new book, I Miss You Already, Preparing for the Unbearable Loss of Your Pet. I'm going to cry just like even saying the name of it. Her book is a teaching memoir on anticipatory pet grief. Her private practice includes direct client coaching, speaking, podcasting, and a loss and grief training consulting business with other animal care providers, especially veterinarian. Her mission is to make a difference in how loss and grief, especially pet loss, is perceived, understood, navigated, and supported through her unique methodologies. So welcome, Nancy. I'm so excited to be speaking with you again. People loved your lecture during the conference, and so I'm really excited and honored to have you back speaking with us for kind of a candid conversation today.
Yes, and thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here, and I'm really happy to be here with this particular audience.
So very supportive of veterinarians and me and our community. So I'm really excited to have you here. And while you are a little bit of a different type of guest, you're a therapist rather than a veterinarian, I think everything that you have to say is completely and utterly, entirely relevant to everything that we do. I think there's a natural yin and yang to therapists and veterinarians. In some ways, the conversation can flow we need you, you need us. So, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's why it's really important to me to start finding ways to collaborate with other veterinarians and to increase the awareness with veterinarians that collaboration with someone who specializes in pet loss and grief especially the anticipatory pet loss experience, because that's where you can make, as well as I can make, the most impact for how the healing goes, how the whole process goes for everybody, including the vets. So, yes, I'm really passionate about that.
Yeah, yeah, I love your passion and it's contagious as well. I mean, I have like a bunch of questions that I'm planning to ask you, but I can already tell we're like gonna go off the rails because there's so many different directions of interest that we can discuss. And I'm gonna initiate the off rail conversation right now before we get to my actual planned questions. But, I was aware of anticipatory grief before, textbook wise, and even in the way I work with veterinary clients and things like that. And I would accommodate for, I know, the fact that they are having anticipatory grief. But I don't think until like we started connecting and then I started thinking about it a lot. And I had the privilege to look at some excerpts of your book before your book came out. We'll talk all about that, as we get deeper into the conversation. But I don't think I'd ever actually named it with a client where I was like, I think you're experiencing anticipatory grief. And just the name of it to be seen and heard and understood. Oh, that's exactly what I'm feeling. I'm feeling grief. And to not
Mhm.
necessarily be able to feel, oh, I can't say that I'm feeling grief because nothing's happened yet. But to say the word and to see someone in their anticipatory grief and to call it that, I've found since we've connected, I've used that word a few times and it's been very powerful.
Yes, yes. And you raised a point which I hadn't really thought about, but I'm really glad you raised it because you mentioned a minute ago about clients may feel like they don't know what to call it because they haven't lost their pet yet. And I never actually connected the dot that may be one reason why clients don't recognize anticipatory grief. The other reason is that there is so much lack of information and education about anticipatory grief until literally, I'm telling you, when I started writing about it on Instagram in 2018, between then and now, especially in the last year, I all of a sudden I'm seeing people talking about using the word anticipatory grief all over social media. And I'm like, yes, I'm so glad that people are becoming aware of it because it's the window of opportunity. Like I spoke about at your conference, it is such an amazing experience if you navigate it well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm wanting to like ask questions about how you got into what you're doing, but I feel like we're already in the subject. So like, let's stick with this and then I'll cut them back and tell everyone how you got into this. Like we're already right in the heart of it. So let's go, right? So I found it really interesting that you said that it's like an important part of the process and this like window of anticipatory grief. Like not only can we experience relief and being seen and comfort in that time, the way we handle the anticipatory grief has repercussions and ripples for how the grief process plays out after the loss, right? Would you say that's accurate?
It's absolutely accurate. And it's one of the things that I talk about everywhere and in my book, because it's the window of opportunity. If people can get the right support and the right guidance to be open to embracing that experience, the experience that seems almost contradictory, that it can be both sad and amazingly healing and joyful. One of my favorite memories of my parting with Toaster, that's Toaster. This is her hairless daughter, Pink, three-legged. And that's another whole story. But one of my favorite memories, believe it or not, is the whole, what I call lifting up instead of putting down. That's my unique methodology I created for myself in trying to come to terms with how can I kill Toaster? I mean, that literally, that's how I looked at it. And I think that's how a lot of people look at it is like, I can't kill my dog, but if she needs assistance, I can, instead of putting her down, I can lift her up and lift myself up at the same time. I've got goosebumps, even though, I mean, this has been back to 2016. And I'm still getting goosebumps because it is so powerful. So to finish, my favorite memory, one of them of Toaster is our parting, is that lifting up and holding her in my arms and watching her absolute bliss eating chocolate and then followed by peanut butter. And I believe she knew what was going on for a lot of different reasons. But it was that parting where I could see, although I was crying through the whole thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was bawling. I was trying to sing Celine Dion's our favorite song that we sang together, You Are My Sunshine. Oh, I mean, literally. And it was interesting, just an aside, when I started singing that or if that song came on, the three of us would sing together. This particular time, neither Toaster nor Pink sang with me. They just listened to me kind of croak it out. But so that whole experience, again, that's another part of it, that connection with them in those moments of letting go that was so absolutely profound and beautiful. And that's what I teach people. That's what I want people to experience. That's what I want people to understand, even if you have only one day left. I've worked with somebody the day of, changed the whole trajectory of his experience in the dogs within hours of the mobile vet arriving. So it's so possible, especially if you have longer time, like I had with Toaster and a little bit I had with Pink. But yeah, it just changes everything. And that's what I want to get across. It's like anticipatory grief is the only opportunity that you have before they're gone to make a difference in what you do and what you say, how you do it, that you may feel guilty or shame or regret about once they're gone. So I've had, especially earlier in my work with pet loss and grief, it seemed that everybody found me after, literally sometimes the day after they let their dog go or their cat go. And I was like, oh, God, wish I had just talked to you yesterday. And, so that's where I'm glad that people are now talking about anticipatory grief, because that is the only time we all have, whether it's human loss or pet loss, to change the trajectory of our post-loss.
Oof, man, so many things. I feel like every time we've had a conversation, I'm in tears, like from like whether it's during the conference or other calls that we've had, I'm like, oh, it's coming. Just a heads up for everyone. I'm a crier. If you haven't heard me cry on the podcast, it's coming. But anyway,
It's fine. Crying.
You can't heal it until you feel it, right?
That's right. And I have a subtitle chapter in my book. It's a crime not to cry.
Oh.
So, yes, there's nothing wrong with crying, because what you're experiencing right now is the magnitude of grief and loss that you've experienced, probably being a vet, especially a mobile vet, where this is probably a lot of what you do, and also unhealed past grief, losses with other pets or even just with other humans. The whole thing about loss, well, the current loss triggers all of that. And so when you're talking about it, and I was then talking about anticipatory grief and guilt and regret and shame. So if there's any little crevice in your heart where that is true for whatever reason, for whether it's an animal, yours, or clients or person, that brings up tears. And it's wonderful that you can do that. And it's wonderful that you model that for, the audience here, the veterinarians here, the vet techs, everybody who is dealing with grief. I don't know if you saw the recent documentary, The Weight They Carry.
No.
I think I sent you, I know you get so many emails, so I
I'm
understand.
like overwhelmed.
I understand how you
like
might have missed it.
75%.
Yes, I understand. I did send you before it aired recently, and I'll send it again, and you can post it. It would be awesome for you to post it with this interview, because it's about the high risk of suicide attempts and completions for veterinarians. And it was done so, goosebumps again, so beautifully. So there was one vet being interviewed about a colleague that she lost and how that happened through a company that didn't allow this vet to take time off after, I forget if, I think it was one of his own animals. I don't remember whether it was his own animal or one animal that, must have just been really tragic. So
Looking it up right now. It looks amazing. Yeah, we'll
the
definitely link that in the show notes for anyone.
yes, and there is a panel discussion after this short video, the documentary. There's a discussion from several different organizations, people, awesome people. And the weight they carry is all of this grief, the anticipatory grief that you're dealing with clients, with your own pets. But, all of it. There is just so much grief that you are exposed to, have to manage, have to deal with one way or another. And the more people understand that sharing the grief and releasing the grief in whatever form it comes up with you, it comes up very easily with tears. With other people, it may come up differently. They could come up as anger, irritability, could come up as insomnia. I mean, there's just so many ways it can appear. But the more you get to recognize, especially your own way of how grief shows up for you and what ways it shows up that you want to navigate differently, because some of the ways are very unhealthy, drinking it, eating it, you know, all those things. So, yeah, I don't know where we were with that, but
Yeah.
did I answer?
You're right on point. Thank you for that beautiful validation that I think it speaks to me, of course, but I think anyone
Oh, everyone.
processes emotion with tears or with like emotionality that's very close on the surface. A lot of sensitive people are in veterinary medicine. And I think we all
Yes.
need to know that not only is it okay to cry, it's a crime not to cry. So I think
Mhm.
that was very well said. And I think also what you said, you mentioned before unprocessed grief. This is my understanding from everything I've studied and how I kind of work with grief and emotions and things like that and everything I do, that when it's unprocessed and you can't let it come out through the body, through the somatic processes of letting tears run down your face or letting yourself sob and heave and letting it just move through your body. But when you can get really stuck and trapped in it or not even unprocessed, you don't even realize you're feeling grief because, in the work that we do, we can so easily lose the tenderness or like you described it as this profound work, the spiritual nature of being with an animal in the end of their
Mhm.
lives and being with people who are so raw and so open and vulnerable. We can start to see it as rote and
Mhm.
somehow not process that grief. And then you think about it, geez, I've done how many euthanasias and I haven't cried for years. And to me, that scares me.
Mhm.
God, there are vets who can do it and they feel it, they take it in, but they don't cry. They can function while they're doing a euthanasia, unlike me, because I get overtaken by it. But the other side of the coin is complete suppression, right? And I think that we're encouraged in our profession, buck up, type A, like don't show emotions, show that you're the white coat doctor and you don't feel, and, you have to be strong for them. And it's like, oh, actually, like, something in between, I feel is kind of a healthier thing from the veterinary perspective. And, just to kind of come back to that unprocessed grief that we carry as a profession, not to mention the guilt, regret, and shame that we're channeling on behalf of our clients and maybe not often, usually not trained in how to hold that without taking it in as our own or too much or blocking it out completely. You know what I mean?
Right, right. And I think all of that is very spot on. And part of the problem, I think, is that people don't know how to identify grief in general, whether it's human loss or pet loss. And that's partly because of the cultures that we've been brought up in and the stifling of anything that's negative or seems to feel negative. We're told to, pick up your bootstraps and move on. Some people are told, well, just go get another dog. Well, no, you can't ever get another dog the same, or cat, or horse, or whatever. Every loss is different. And so I think part of the problem is that people don't even recognize it. So when they're going to their coping skills, which let's say is alcohol, they're not even aware why. They just know they don't feel right. And if they have a history of drinking, you can bet that they're going to rely on just the connection between, I don't feel good, I'm having a drink or a substance or whatever. So I think that's part of the problem. You know, I mean, addiction has always been treated by therapists as you have to make these connections. You have to connect the dots. And when you allow yourself to feel, then you have the ability, you have the choice to start connecting the dots. And that's where you can begin to process it. So I say unhealed grief, which you're defining as unprocessed grief, same thing, puts a lock on your heart. And the key to unlock it is to share your grief with others. And you can't share your grief with others until you yourself have at least allowed yourself to feel and see and recognize at least some of the grief. You may not all of it or all the dots connected to that particular loss. That could be overwhelming if you're doing that all at once without any support anyway. So it's in the sharing where people really start to heal, and they feel by sharing validated, which is so important in pet loss because it's a disenfranchised grief still. And
What do you mean by that? Can you actually elaborate a little bit on what you mean by a disenfranchised grief?
yes, so there is grief that's acceptable, that's known, that's understood, that's valued, that's supported, such as human loss and grief is supported, validated by bereavement day. Bereavement time off work if you lose your parent but are there many? There are some, but are there many businesses, large, small, whatever, where you get a bereavement time off for the loss of your pet? No. Again, so that's disenfranchised. That's like saying pet loss isn't as valid and doesn't deserve the same recognition as human loss. And the same with the insurance industry. I mean, these are the areas that I really want my work to get into because it's system change. And that's a way I really invite people to collaborate with whomever, but, include me, because that is really where we're going to make the biggest impact on grief and loss. And whether it's human or pet, it's going to be both. When it starts sifting into the systems, like veterinarian school, I think this is still true, but correct me if I'm wrong. Most veterinarians are not trained at all in the grief from my viewpoint. What is grief? How do you recognize it in your client? What do you do? Do you recognize it even in the animals? I mean, animals grieve, believe me. Pink grieved so hard for Toaster. It was amazing. When Toaster had her puppies, this is on Animal Planet, you can see on my website, I delivered personally one of Toaster's puppies, the hairless male, to someone in Laguna. So you know where that is. It's close to me. It's about an hour or so from San Diego where I am. I delivered the puppy, and when I got back in the car, Toaster is always around my neck. That's another part of the whole story that maybe nobody actually understands yet about how they were my service dogs, but she was always around my neck. And so when we got in the car, she jumped on my neck, of course, but she did something she's never done before. She pressed her cheek against my cheek, pressed it like this. And I felt all this wetness. And I moved away and I looked at her. She was crying. It was the first of her puppies that she knew was leaving her and the rest of the litter. She, it broke my heart. But, I explained to her the value of this puppy and how it's going to help somebody else just like you've helped me, So yes, I'm talking about recognizing grief and expressing grief, that it's such an important part of changing how grief is disenfranchised. That's where we started with this. Yeah. So those are some good examples, I think of how it's devalued. And it's also devalued just by the language, bad language, so inadequate language of how we support others who have lost their pets, even family, especially family members and friends who don't know how to support someone who's lost their pet. And they don't understand the meaning of that pet or the role, even if that person has some other pets too. So they lost one, well, you've got another one. Well, no, you don't have the same pet. but they don't understand. So they try. I really do believe that nobody who has been told just go get another pet is saying that maliciously. I think they're saying it because they don't know what else to say and they don't know how to make them feel better. And it seems logical in their minds that if you just get another dog or cat, you'll feel better. And I want you to feel better. So go get another dog. It doesn't compute and they don't understand that. And so quite often have the opportunity with my clients telling me about, they just lost their pet. Now they know they're going to be facing telling people and they're facing, how are they going to tell? This is part of what my work with them, after through the anticipatory grief and then the post loss is okay. Now, how do you deal with sharing this with others in a way that you can set good boundaries and take care of yourself and not flood yourself with too much emotion with the wrong person? Happens all the time. So I give them a lot of information and ideas, and even role plays with how to talk about it. And this is not just for that person's particular grief work. It's so important for everybody to learn how to educate others to support them because they don't know. There's no book out there yet like mine. And where I talk about that. And I'm actually doing another book that is going to really be helpful for this particular issue of how to support other people and how to support yourself. And that's a book in itself. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So the impact of every one of us taking the opportunity when we've lost our pet and we have to tell somebody and they respond, or even a stranger, may find out somehow and you're in a conversation, they say, oh, I'm sorry, did you get another dog yet? Or when are you going to get another dog? That's the opportunity we all have to change the system. That little exchange where we say, that question isn't helpful, but what is? And then they say, something that they could say to them. Because you can't do one without the other. I mean, that's not helpful. If you just cut them off and say, that wasn't helpful, that's not helpful to them either. So it's such an important way that all of us can start making changes in how pet grief is valued and supported.
This is so, so good. You're really touching on one of my ultimate top favorite subjects that I've grappled with for years and years, trying to find the balance. Basically, like some of what you described is kind of equivalent to what I call either toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing. I'm not sure if you're thinking of it in those same words or not, but I've been in moments of like deep grief, not in particular related to pet loss, but were people who were the wrong person to talk to. And when I say wrong person to talk to, they didn't intuitively know how to handle me in that state. Not that they're the wrong person inherently, but that they didn't have an organic sense of what would be comforting or soothing or uplifting to me. And instead, I've actually spoken to a therapist where I was like, why do people do this? And she said to me that, I know I'm not telling you this, I'm telling our audience, I'm just talking about, what
Absolutely. Go ahead.
in this
What-
realm is.
Your therapist is just going to validate what I said. So it's fine. Go ahead.
And she was like, well, when people do this toxic positivity or they try and jump to the next subject or they act like they're trying to make you feel better, they want to give you positivity. It's they're uncomfortable with their own emotions, seeing your emotions.
Right.
It's people who care deeply, like they're really the right person. They just don't know.
They don't know. Yes.
And yet it's so deeply painful to be invalidated or to be like, that's not what I've been saying. Like,
yes.
I'm grieving something that is so deep right now that you're really glossed over the point of it. Or, so I really have strong feelings about this toxic positivity because you see it a lot in the spiritual world and the spiritual community.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
There's this desire
Yes.
to overcome your grief and to think
Be positive and affirmations about it. Oh,
yeah. And there's so much good from spirituality. I consider myself a spiritual person. I've been immersed in spiritual communities for as long as I can remember. And it's those communities that have invalidated me deeply over and over and over again. And I'm like, but their ideas are good. Positivity is inherently good, but
yes, but there's a time.
for ages.
There's a time and a way to do that. So you are exactly in the perfect position I'm talking about. You could practice with your therapist, for example, about some person that you know really wants to support you, that you really want the support from them, that they're a key, meaningful person in your life, and you feel maybe deprived and depressed that they're not there for you because they don't know how to be there for you. So you're in a perfect position to do what I'm suggesting. Figure out how you can help them help you. What you can say to them in a kind way that doesn't squash them, that shows some appreciation. For example, I'm giving you some of this already now.
Great.
So,
Great. I
so
love it.
yeah, so you give some appreciation, or the benefit of the doubt, and you could say something like, you are so important in my life, and I know you want to support me, and I want your support. And so I have to tell you that that wasn't really helpful to me. But what would be helpful to me is if you do this, say that, whatever it is, or just sit with me. Or if you could say to them, maybe don't feel like you have to make this better. You don't have to make it better. It's not your job to make it better. It's my job to navigate this grief and hopefully in a way that transforms you. That's my work. And then you have that interaction with somebody that you already have a level of trust. They're the perfect ones to start with
Because they want to be there for you.
because they want to be there. Yes.
And when you're vulnerable and you've lost a pet, the last thing anyone wants to do is hurt you. They'll probably be a little embarrassed, but I think ultimately what they really want is to be there for you. And when you tell them, beautiful way that you explained, I think that that's a very, healing
Yes.
relationship.
Yes. And if you pick up that they're embarrassed, I just did this with a colleague who I don't know very well, who may seem like a tangential kind of example, but it's not. It's not about grief, but it's an example of what I'm talking about. So this person just recently met me through some interviews, some podcasting, not her interviewing me, but she saw some of my interviews with her colleagues. And I did a request from people, my colleagues, if they knew any VAs to refer to me. I'm desperate for a social media VA because I am not
I have someone. I
skilled.
actually have someone for you. I have someone for you if you want. By the way.
Yes. So anyway, so she responded. She told me in that moment, she said, I know I'm going to be meeting with somebody on Wednesday. I'm going to refer her to you. So she did follow up with that referral. She sent me on Messenger the name and everything. Well, she hadn't vetted this VA herself. She didn't know this VA in the context of her work. She knew her in a different context. And so when I gave her feedback nicely that, thank you for the referral, but here's what happened. Here's this information. She, it's not $7. She was in the Philippines, and Philippines are known to have the $6 to $8 an hour fees.
Yeah.
So I thought that what this was going to be was $31.25. And I said, that was news to me. And she kept writing me like twice back how sorry she was that next time she's going to vet the person herself. In other words, she felt shame. She felt that she had done me a disservice, in making this referral, having me go through that process with this person. And I wrote back and I said, no, don't feel bad. I needed to have this information. Now I'm prepared. So you give them some way to feel better, that it was helpful to you in certain ways. So in that example with you, the certain way it was helpful is that I see you're trying to be there for me. That's how you lift them up instead of them feeling guilty, shame, bad.
Yeah. Oh, there's like meta levels of this lifting up, not putting down, right? In caring for your own emotional needs and sort of training your support network as to what feels supportive to you.
Exactly.
Very beautiful. No, that story makes perfect sense. I know what you're talking about. I'm going to email you after this to tell you about some of my VA journeys. Hi, it's Dr. Eve here. As you know, as veterinarians and veterinary professionals, we pour our hearts into caring for animals every day. but who's holding space for your spirit to shine. I created Soulshine Space for vets to be that space. Soulshine Space for veterinarians is not your run-of-the-mill membership. It is a portal where science meets spirituality, where we can hold evidence and intuition in the same hand. It's for those of us who can hold both the tangible and the mystery at the same time. It's for those of us who feel the call that there's more to this life than our job description. Join our monthly gatherings where we explore meditation, forest bathing, aromatherapy, herbalism, breathwork, plant and mushroom ID, sound healing, healing modalities from all around the world, as well as special subjects in psychology and spirituality, plus so much more. With all of this designed to nourish both the left and the right brain sides of the healer within you. You'll get to connect with other veterinarians who understand both your dedication to medicine and a desire for meaning and connection beyond the clinical. For under $100 a month, you can join a community that sees all of who you are. No commitment is needed. You can come or go as you please. And if you are listening to this podcast, as a huge thank you, you'll get a special discount off your membership. This offer is available for a limited time and rules and restrictions do apply. So check out the link and your discount code in the show notes. And if this calls to your heart, I hope you'll join us today. I'm so excited to see you inside our Soulshine community for vets, and I can't wait to welcome you in. Okay, so we had sort of touched on, so I was using the language of spiritual bypassing. We were talking a little bit about spiritual communities, which, of course, in times of loss, you have like religious communities, spiritual communities, new age type spirituality, all sorts of spirituality can call to a person when they're that vulnerable and in the depths of loss and even in anticipatory grief, making sense of it all, right? I'm so curious. I'm trying to put my question into words because it has multiple prongs. But I'm curious from your perspective, what is the role of spirituality? What is the role of different cultures of spirituality? I have a dear friend that just had to put her cat down, and she's Buddhist from Taiwan, and had a deep, deep conversation about what euthanasia means in that tradition. And it's very serious.
Yes.
Very serious and all around, but there's some religions and some spiritualities that are more or less compatible with the concept of euthanasia, that have more or less healing kind of paradigms for how to deal with the grief before and after. And, I'm just so curious because I've also just recently had enough people recommend this book, The Awakened Brain by Dr. Lisa Miller, to me. And she also has The Spiritual Child that I also read. I sped read the hell out of both of these books. I'm going to read them like 3 more times each. But she references a lot of spirituality as it pertains to end of life grief processing through.
Yes.
Can you speak to that large multi-pronged question that is less of a question than a vomiting of words and ideas?
Yeah, so you may help me guide me in my answer for what you want to know. So my first thing to say is that we always should respect anybody's spirituality. That's number one policy. Number one rule is that you don't disagree and you don't try to change somebody's spiritual beliefs. You can talk about your own and in that way share a different perspective, but not in the context of trying to convince them. And that's a tricky tightrope because sometimes even just sharing it can sound like to them that you're trying to change their mind. So it's important to preference, like, for example, that kind of conversation by saying, I respect your beliefs and I have a different perspective. Ask permission. Can I share that with you? Not to convince you, but can I just share how I experienced this same question? And it's from a different viewpoint. Maybe it's from a veterinarian viewpoint or whatever. So that's the first thing about integrating people talking about spirituality. So can you phrase all that you said into more of a question about what you want me to talk about in terms of spirituality?
I guess what would you say is the role of spirituality in the grief process?
Oh, that's a perfect question. Now I get it. Well framed. Okay, so and that goes along with how I answered it at first. So where does spirituality belong? It belongs, for sure, for everybody, but it's different for everybody. So where it belongs is understanding that particular person's beliefs and how they're looking and experiencing their spirituality in that context of the pet loss. So, in other words, in those situations, you don't even necessarily go into your own beliefs, right? You just say, oh, okay. Like if I have somebody who's Catholic, I don't talk about New Age concepts. I just talk about,
That's hard for people like us, right? That's hard.
but it's not that hard. I mean, I'm trained to not impose. I mean,
Right.
I share so much of myself more than any other quote licensed therapist because I'm doing coaching, not psychodynamic therapy. And because I find that that exchange like this is so much more powerful.
Me too.
And so, but I'm still, nevertheless, I still uphold my values, my training values of that you never impose on a client your own beliefs or your own, I had a client with a different political party, really hard for me. So, but we just don't go there. We just don't talk about it. And I don't tread on their beliefs. So, what you do then is you try and get them to talk about more of their spiritual beliefs and what they're experiencing about that with this particular loss. And, whether it's anticipatory or post loss. And then you try and support them in the ways that fit their concepts because nobody is right or wrong. No spirituality is right or wrong. And so it's really just a matter of respecting and asking, being curious. Well, what does that mean with that belief? What does that mean with this loss? And then support them in any way that you can, or redirect them to some spiritual teacher community that will help them. Because who are we to say if they're helped by their church and their church is not what we agree with?
Yeah,
It doesn't mean that that church can't help them
that's right.
because they're part of that church.
That's right. That's right. Oh, I love that. I love that. That's like radical openness, radical acceptance. Like that's the name of the game, right? When you're holding people that way and you're coaching them and supporting them through some of the most difficult and vulnerable times.
Absolutely. And people will respond well to that, to the sense that you're respecting their process, their beliefs, and that you want to support them.
Yeah, that's really beautiful to hear a little bit about some of your thought process and how you link and hold space for spirituality along with grief in the way you coach people. And I think most of us veterinarians, unless we're in some coaching role ourselves or providing grief services of some kind deliberately or holding a grief support group or something like that, most of us are not going to have to go so deep into like learning about people's beliefs and holding,
Yeah.
space for something that we're just like, oh God, I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it may
Yeah.
come up. It does come up, but we're not like in this position that you're in that where you choose to like take the person and radically accept them and work with them and their grief and their
Right.
personality
Right.
and their
Right.
how things affect them. And so I
Right.
think we're off the hook slightly for some of that. But I mean, I kind of think that we're not at the same time. Like our vibe still needs to hold that radical acceptance, even if it's not on a conceptual basis. It's even with the body language, with the way you listen and pause and maybe like lock eyes as someone is speaking about what it is that matters to them. I think all of
Right.
that is
Right.
still very powerful, even for us
Absolutely.
veterinarians, because while we're not
Yes.
trained therapists or coaches or
Right.
whatever formal grief support looks like, we are there in that moment, and we better freaking, show up with some semblance of emotional capacity. Or,
Empathy.
like,
Empathy.
empathy. Yeah. And like
Empathy.
all of us have deep empathy. It's a matter of like the skill and the capacity,
Yes.
the how to. So, I mean,
Yes.
some of this is so interesting. Like, what is our role? What is not our role? Are we a therapist? We're not a therapist, but to what extent can we create harm or create healing with our presence? I think all of that.
Exactly. Exactly. And that brings me back to what I started with in the beginning is the collaboration with people like me for the benefit of the human And that funnels down to the benefit of their pet. So your client is the pet, but really the pet's dependent on the client's, the person's experience and choices, literally choices, life or death. So you have to, I think, this is how I see it. Veterinarians are in a position not to be therapists, but to know enough when to refer, to know enough how to support in the moment and how to help them collaborate. Like if they're in working with someone, to work everybody together for the best interests of the pet and the human, the parent. It's to me, it's just so obvious. It benefits all, including the vets, because then you are off the hook. Like you're saying, you're not therapists. Nobody's expecting you to be grief therapists. But I think veterinarians, especially people who are doing a lot of euthanasia, could benefit from understanding the client's perspective more. And that's what I did in my presentation. You know,
Yes.
really, here's what clients are really going through. And even as a vet, if you've gone through your own, that doesn't necessarily mean you understand, as I do from my perspective, about clients' mental health and how to work with all of that. So I think the veterinarians can have sort of a much more profound and easier experience in those situations if they understand more of how to be empathetic. What does that mean? What does that look like? Not overstep your bounds and get help where it's needed.
Yeah. Oh, beautifully said. I mean, there's so much there. And I want to give a shout out to my house call veterinarians. I would say, in my observation, house call vets, especially in home euthanasia vets, really pour into this and tend to be, really on point with their like emotional connection with the client. And, in general, I would say that the left hand isn't talking to the right hand. Like, therapists
Yeah.
want to help with this, vets need help with this. Like, if you're the one pushing the euthanol on the other end, you don't want to be harmed by that either. And if you have an uncomfortable experience with the client while you're doing that kind of act, that can become unprocessed
Yeah.
grief as well. And I think everyone wants to be as loving and as connected and
Right.
supportive as possible, and may
Right.
simply not have the skills or not realize how they come off, or may not have, this is a big one, the systemic a built capacity to take the time. This is the biggest one, right? You're nodding. They don't have the time, they don't have the support, they don't have the professional community saying like, no, this is really important and we've got to make it work so that you have the time. You don't feel you're ever rushing someone through a euthanasia. You're not rushing yourself through a euthanasia. Like, these are such
Right. Well, yeah.
profound
Yes.
moments, and we can easily fall into rote, like, oh, I did like 5 euthanasias today. I did a spay. I handled Addison's disease. I handled, 17 other cases, and you just roll it off the top of your tongue when it's like, this is big. Like,
Yes.
and when it feels that rote to you, it can sometimes even inadvertently come through. That's what I
Yeah.
worry about. And I think, yeah, as I said before, I think in-home euthanasia vets are on it. That's why they're in the home to begin with, to meet the person where they are, to
Yeah. Yes.
let
It's a different way of doing
gravity.
service.
That's right. It's different, and it's inherently the paradigm and the lens through which you're looking at this is
Yes.
inherently different by being in the home.
Yes.
I think
Right.
brava and props to our IHE colleagues.
Yes. I second that. And you're right when you picked up, I'm saying, when you said systemic, yes, that's where, again, a lot of changes could happen and needs to happen in the early training. And I don't know if anybody's doing that, trying to do that. I don't know, but I think it would be so much easier for veterinarians to provide the kind of services we're talking about in a way that we're talking about if they are from the get-go trained about at least understanding,
You know
not
what
necessarily.
makes me sorry, like, that's just like, I have these moments of like incredulity about like our training. Like, I'm still so very angry at certain things that we didn't get. Like, we weren't trained how to literally do a euthanasia in vet school. That's something you learn on the job. But before you should ever even learn the technical aspect, we have to meet this experience with such, this is a profound experience. And the fact that we don't get even an iota of it's criminal, in my opinion. I'm
Yes.
so angry at
It-
vet school.
yeah.
I mean, nevertheless, like many veterinarians are like their inherent empathy overrides that and it becomes intuitive. And yet we should still receive that training because
Yeah.
not everyone is a natural in those situations, right?
That's right. That's right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, some people, are more introverted and maybe it's hard for them to have different levels of interactions. Their focus is on treating the animal and getting help for the animal. So, I mean, I think just the more exposure that people have to what we're talking about, the more we can maybe all band together somehow and make some changes. Because yeah, I think when I first heard that veterinarians don't get any training about the grief side of it.
None.
And actually I didn't even know you didn't get the technical training in the school. That's even worse. But hearing that, it's really such a disservice that the school is not providing any of that, including your technical work. I mean, why is that? It's
Yeah.
definitely a part of your job if you're going to especially end up in the ER, right?
Yeah.
Where you may not have any choice.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot I regret about vet school, and is partially why I teach what I teach because likewise, that's also not taught, like how to run your own practice, how to
Right.
self-advertise as a veterinarian and do what it is you actually really want to do and have all of the technical support business and every nitty-gritty thing that we definitely didn't get any of that in school. So I have an eternal bone to pick with vet school and why I'm currently in education right now and why you are as well. You're kind of filling that gap as well. So I'm kind of wanting to like pivot now. Like I usually start my episodes by asking a little bit about the story, your like how you got here, but I wanted to pivot to your book and maybe through that you can tell us a little bit about how you came to write
It
this
is about that.
book. Yeah, how did
It,
you come to write this beautiful book? What's it about? What's your journey been like in the authorship and where are we now?
yes. So the book is entitled I Miss You Already, Preparing for the Unbearable Loss of Your Pet. It's a teaching memoir, which means that part of the book is written from the perspective of my professional expertise and my skills, and I'm educating through the lens of my own personal journey, which I share in great detail, great vulnerability, including the shame, regret I had with Pink and Toaster's lifting up, which again is a spiritual concept, but I let people define that however they do, but that is how I came up with that part. So the journey that I went on with Toaster and Pink through the very beginning of clear anticipatory grief was 2 years ahead of when I actually lifted up Toaster. And in the beginning of those 2 years, of course, it still was far off, but I could see Rainbow Bridge, which I hope everybody knows what that means, it was on the horizon. Like all of a sudden, it's there. It's not here. It's not even here, but it's there where it wasn't. And I began my journey of writing. And that's how part of how the book became written was way back then. So I combined in I Miss You Already my whole journey through the anticipatory grief, including how I came to finally be able to accept that I was going to lose Toaster. I didn't want her to go in a traumatic way, that I was going to choose to assist her when that came time close enough. It's like I was in the sooner than later. She wasn't on her deathbed, and I have no regrets about that. But, she might have lived another month, 2 year. How do I know? I just knew that at that point, she was so close to suffering and loss of function that I made that decision. But the way I got to it, as I explained a little bit earlier, was I had to change not only the terminology, but the process. So lifting up is the term that for me replaced putting down or euthanasia. And it conveys the methodology, which is how you go through that process of surrender and letting go and making the decisions, whether it's treatment, surgery with a new cancer diagnosis, for example, or whether they're just aging and they're not well, or there's a sudden loss. If there's any time with a sudden loss, like, Pink became a sudden loss for me within 9 months of Toaster, not expected, devastating, absolutely devastating. But that process, that methodology that I help people create in each situation. So there's no formula. There's a few ingredients that stay the same, but the formula depends on everything with that particular client and the pet and the time there is and whatever is going on. And so I go through that in the book. And then I talk a lot about the experiences instead of stages of grief. I don't talk about the stages of grief. I talk about the experiences that are in that experience of anticipatory grief. And that, to me, is one of the most unique, precious, profound pieces of that book for people to understand. So it's going to change a lot, I think, not only for parents, but also for veterinarians to really understand what goes on in those experiences and how you work with those experiences. And I share all of those experiences from my own viewpoint of what I went through and how I reconciled, how I, knew what to do, how to navigate them. When one of them is the role reversal, for example, the state of experience of the role reversal where, I became Toaster's caregiver. I certainly became Pink's caregiver, 24/7 hospice in the last 2 months. And myself, which I wasn't prepared to do. Didn't know anything. I didn't even know at that point, I didn't even know there was an animal hospice, 2016. It wasn't even, none of my vets ever said anything. Well, maybe you want to get some help. So anyway, so that's all in the book. That's a really profound dovetail the role of reversal with veterinarians to understand and to help even identify for clients where they're at. They may not even understand what you're saying to them about the condition of their pet, especially if it's a terminal diagnosis. So that's where I see veterinarians could really benefit from learning all this, and pet parents will benefit from, it's so clear how what I went through, how I navigated it, and how I transformed loss into love, which is an expanded heart, and grief into growth. So the work is all in the book of how to make this whole experience transformational work, that it doesn't just end with the loss of like moving on of your pet or getting over your pet. We never get over. Forget it. Just forget it. With important human and pet losses, where there's significant meaning of the relationship, we never get over, nor should we, but we should get over the angst and the trauma of it. But the missing never stops. So that's all in the book. And I'm doing right now to help publish it and get it out there, which requires marketing and, a distribution and all that stuff. I'm doing a Kickstarter that will end soon. So act like now. And so anyway, it's not a donation-based campaign. You can choose rewards that are deeply discounted. There's 2 veterinarian packages, and then there's other packages for everybody and anybody. But particularly, there's some really, I hope, appealing packages for vets. I think 7 people so far have selected that. Yay. But yeah, so my hope is that the Kickstarter is a way to not only get the funds, but to give people an opportunity to get everything. I'm doing an online course that'll be included in the rewards based on the book. And so it's a win-win, is I guess what I'm trying to say. It's not just supporting, pledging money. It's you get something out of it. I get something out of it, which is the money to help really market this well so that it gets out there into the hands of people who need it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. I've enjoyed very much watching your process of finishing the book and getting a sneak peek and adding a little testimonial. That was really, really fun. And I have no doubt that this book is going to be beneficial both for animal guardians and veterinarians and people in the realm of what we do. I think this touches on so many things from like a narrative perspective, just like feeling your feelings and just people not feeling alone and seeing that, you went through this very exact thing. And then also like there's practical things like some of the suggestions that you shared today about how if someone's not saying something that's helpful or it's in the realm of toxic positivity, you could address that without shaming them and lift them up, essentially. So I think this is a gem. I think it's going to be wonderful. I think it's going to be really well received. I wanted to also respond to something that you had mentioned about how you don't talk about the stages of grief per se, but like the experience of grief and how, like, I often think about, we all know the stages of grief, anger and bargaining and yada yada. But it's very, very interesting. A few times you've mentioned anger and grief, the connection. And I wanted to share just like a brief little kind of story with an experience that I had with my own coach about this that taught me a lot and I think is worth addressing head on, that often under anger, there's fear, and under fear, there's grief. So I had an experience where I went to my coach, my personal coach, Hannah Taylor, and I was angry. I was pissed. And I felt like there was something very unjust. And she was like, can you get quiet a little bit, slow down and start to notice your feelings and your breath? And like we did some somatic work and she was like, what are you feeling now? And I'm like, fear, fucking fear. What is this? And she was like, can you sit a little bit longer, breathe and slow down? What's under that? And I'm like, the fucking like waterworks opened up and I was like, it's grief. Oh my God. And like this moment of just, she was like, yeah, that's often what's under there. And ever since that experience, anytime I feel anger, I'm like, this is valid.
Yeah.
This is valid. And we're going to have some process to do to figure out what the fear and or the grief is so that I'm left with grief. That's what I can work with. Anger can be, it's valid. It needs to happen. It needs to move through. But ultimately, for the long haul, I need to work with the grief. That was the kind of understanding that I got. And I think that's another reason that your work is so very important, because even if we don't think we're dealing with grief, we're dealing with anger or we're dealing with, denial, or we're dealing with, often under it is grief. And it's not just about, it's about pet loss. 100%. That's one gateway into this work, but it's also about the anger and grief of our profession and what we're doing and how we feel in it and what our livelihood has become for so many of us who are not happy in the work. So
Yes.
before we kind of like started to close up the episode, I wanted to address that grief and anger connection that you had alluded to.
Yeah. Well, the reason I claim that I am a loss and grief specialist and subspecialize in pet loss is because from the time I began my practice as a licensed clinical social worker, every presenting problem a client came in with had an underlying grief attached to it. Whether it was they lost their job, whether it was they lost their pregnancy, whether it's they lost their parent, whether their kids went to college, there's always loss and grief. So to me, I can't separate out life from loss. They're connected. I've joked that life should be spelled LOSS. So I know, no, it's too much of a downer, but really it's always connected. And so then the task becomes, like you're saying, start to understand what are the signs, what are the experiences of loss and grief. And that's what Kubler-Ross started with many decades ago. And she did a great job. She brought it out of the closet, but she missed anticipatory grief and she missed transformational after the acceptance. And you're just like, there, okay, they're dead. No, they're dead. And what am I going to do to make meaning of honoring them and my own life forward? So that's what's in the book. And that's what those experiences are. There's 7 of them. So, yeah. So what were you saying?
Well, no, I was just wanting to know, like, how can people get your book? How can they work with you if they'd like to work with you? How do they find you? If people were really, really enchanted by this conversation and they want more, how can they do that?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. I'm on LinkedIn. There's a link for that for the Kickstarter. Act now because it's going to end soon.
When does it end? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's this Saturday.
Oh gosh. Okay.
But yeah, it's going to be some word of mouth at this point because this isn't going to air before. But when I say that they could still do it, is if I meet my goal by Saturday, then I'd be able to allow people to still make pledges and everybody will still get the discount and I'll still get the funds. So I'm just intending there can be no other option. I'm going to make the goal by Saturday. So when this airs, it'll be okay. They'll probably be able to. So there's a QR code for that. There's a link for the Kickstarter. And then I'm on Instagram. My Instagram account is devoted entirely to pet loss and grief. It's some great posts. Unhealed grief is on there. Puts a lock on your heart. And my website is www.growbeyondgrief.com. And of course, email me, Nancy Gordon, 7practices, the number 7practices @gmail.com. And if for some reason I've been having so much trouble with missing emails, and so if I don't answer right away, then email me again because that means I didn't see it.
Well, thank you so much. I know that this sort of like trans veterinary therapy communication and collaboration is just what we need, just what the doctor ordered. I'm so glad that you reached out to me all those months ago and that me to read your book as you were working on it. And thank you for speaking at our conference. Thank you for being here with us. It's a honor, and just thank you again. Much appreciated.
Yes, well, I appreciate you so much because it was, what the chapter that I gave you was my most vulnerable chapter to give you, which was for the veterinarian. And, my overriding priority and value in writing this book was to make sure that what I was saying to veterinarians was accurate, was helpful, not insulting. I never wanted to insult when I was making suggestions. I never wanted to insult anyone. Where would we be and where would our animals be without the work that you do? So it was a vulnerable thing for me to do, to share with you. And I didn't really know you that well, but your response was so great. It was what I expected. It was what I trusted, that you would give me honest feedback and make some changes. You identified the one part that I had the most question about, like, is this insulting? And I took that out and reframed it, with your suggestions. So I so appreciated that because you now helped to make that a better book.
That's so meaningful. And thank you for, when I'm editing or working on projects, I'm a tough critic on myself and everyone else, TBH. So you were so gracious and so responsive, and I could feel your heart through this collaboration and your desire to do good in the world and to
thank you.
Absolutely palpable. So it's absolutely my honor.
Thank you. Mine too. To have the opportunity to be in front of more veterinarians, that's a real gift to me for what I want to do in the future.
And ultimately, all of us and the animals. Thanks again for being here with me, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as The House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for House Call Vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.